there are multiple female deities, and some might seem to, and of course, their roles and responsibilities would be influenced by gender experiences in the colonial Americas. And so you will see some where there are stereotypic kinds of features associated with them, but then there are so many where they're not. There's so many where there aren't stereotypic features. And also, depending on where you are, the gender of certain deities might change. So there is, I'm thinking about Ochosi, the hunter deity. Ochosi is female in Yoruba land, in West Africa. But in the diaspora, Ochosi became male. And I always wonder, is it because hunting would be more associated with a masculine gender than with a feminine gender, that Ochosi becomes male in the diaspora. But yes, and even when we think of those female Orisha or deities, I keep focusing on Yoruba because that's the tradition I study the most. But this would be true across Vodou and Akan-based traditions. They still have such a range of characteristics and personalities and elements that would span both masculine and feminine qualities, that in terms of the way we tend to understand them as rigidly divided. So, as much as Oshun can be sweet, she can be tormentous too. She could, they would have those aggressive qualities and those softer qualities as well. And you can see that even with the male deities.
I think that's really important because it's showing the kind of heterogeneous nature of the deities that are assigned a gender. That is, they have masculine and feminine sides. But it's also the sense that when we speak about God or powerful spirits, we're using both pronouns. I mean, one thing, to this day, it is still very difficult for me by habit when I'm writing about God, I will say he until I correct myself, and I've kind of come when I'm talking about monotheistic faiths to use it because we don't know. But I think just that language itself has a tremendous power in how the lens through which we view the world.
I'm glad you bring that up because it allows me to talk about something else that is so difficult to access because of our having been socialized in the diaspora into Western languages. And when we're getting to languages like French and Spanish, oh my goodness, they are highly gendered, even more
Highly
gendered
gendered.
than English. But these West and West Central, Niger Congo based, these are all part of the Niger Congo language family. Those languages are non-gendered. They are
Hmm.
non-gendered languages. So, for example, I remember when I was doing research on my book on Trinidad, one of the things I came across was that in the 19th century, and presumably before that, there wasn't even a word for sibling. There was not a word, and we wouldn't even say sister or brother. It would be sibling. The word
Hmm.
was elder sibling or junior sibling because of the significance of seniority, but it's sibling. It's sibling. It's not, or even the way you would say, a boy in the Yoruba language, it would be child, um, anatomical male, or girl, child, anatomical female. Child comes first. The
Role comes
gender
first, not
neutral.
sex. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So that's another thing to think about, that we gender them, but the language is not gendered in most of these cases.
I think I realized later on in my life that it was my first feminist choice when I wore the hijab because I still understood that I was going against like mainstream culture. When I came back in grade 11, which for us is our graduating year in Montreal, Quebec, I was the only one in my class. I went to an all girls Catholic school, and even though there were a few Muslim girls in my grade, I came back that final year with, I was one of the popular kids that, always cracked jokes and had a lot of energy. But I came back and a lot of people were surprised and shocked at my choice and wondered if I was indoctrinated, which was not the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with time, I think they've realized that it was really like a meaningful choice in my life. Yeah.
You're raising a lot of points there. And I think one that's important for listeners to realize is often when we see someone wear a piece of religious clothing, whether it's the hijab, the kippah, cross, whatever it might be, it's not just a marker to say, hey, I'm part of this team. It is also a tool or a practice for spiritual growth for the person themselves by reminding them of virtues that they're supposed to emulate. And so it is not just a badge in some ways, it is itself a spiritual practice. I want to touch on this idea of feminism because I think that's really at the heart of what we're going to explore. So you said this was in some ways the first feminist choice you made. And when I read that, and I heard you say it as well, it struck me as really interesting because my memory and what I see on the news and in non-Muslim culture is this idea that the hijab or other forms of dress that Muslim women may wear are forced on them, are constraints, etc. So we'll explore all of it in detail. But why would you? Sorry, but why is that your first feminist choice?
I think first feminist choice because I really had to think about it, and I actually started wearing it at 16, but I kept telling everyone around me, like, I'm not sure, I'm thinking about it, I want to, and at 17, that's when I committed to it, but 16 is when I started testing it out, so I tested it out for about a year, and I say first feminist choice because it was so, I wouldn't say outcasting myself or alienating myself, but I was definitely making a choice that was not cool or popular or endearing. We're at this point we're in 2004, like 3 years post 9/11. Like I said, no one in my grade was wearing a hijab. Very few girls within the whole school were wearing it, so this was not anything that was going to give me any kind of like cultural relevancy, and so I had to think about it. And I say first feminist choice because I did it because I sincerely believed in it and felt a form of emancipation towards it, even though everything around me could have pulled me in another direction to kind of keep going with like a life that I had previous to that I still loved and really enjoyed, but I felt called towards that choice, knowing that it would not be necessarily a first choice. And I say feminist just because I think I really sat with myself and listened, like questioned myself as to whether I wanted to do this and for what reasons. And I would say I even took a year to commit to it. The first year was more me testing it out, and then I became convinced, and then decided to commit to hijab. But that's why I would say it was my first feminist choice, because I was doing it for myself, because I felt emancipation and empowerment through it, and because I wasn't doing it because it brought me something in exchange in society, meaning like a kind of cultural relevancy or any kind of thing that could amplify my choice to be like, you'll be more of a cool girl if you do this or that. No, I wasn't becoming any cooler, at least not at that time, to decide to wear the hijab.
Thanks for watching. For more content like this or more episodes of How God Works, subscribe to catch all new episodes of How God Works, available every other Sunday on YouTube or your favorite audio streaming app. Learn more about our ongoing research at howgodworks.org.